Good evening. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight for Mizzou Botanic Gardens 2022 Jacquelyn K. Jones Lecture. I'm Pete Millier, Director of Mizzou Botanic Garden. I think I speak for everyone associated with the garden when I say that the Jones Lecture is an annual highlight for us. And I did warn our featured speaker tonight that one of our first speakers were Dr. Peter and Patricia Raven from Missouri Botanical Garden. So we've got the bar set high, and I think these folks are going to take it a little higher for us tonight. Tonight's guest lecturer, Dr. Kathleen Wolf, whose life work has centered on the benefits of trees and nearby nature for humans, is speaking our language, and we are pleased to have her here to share her message. Before I introduce the first of two Mizzou campus collaborators, I'd like to remind everyone that we are sponsoring a forest bathing event tomorrow beginning at 9 a.m. at the beautiful Hinkson Creek Recreation Area south of Mizzou Arena. It's just off of McDeaver Drive, and you're all invited to attend. And if you do want to come by, we have little maps to the area because I know that's a great description of the area, but most of us here on campus know where it is, but it is kind of hard to find if you're not familiar with campus. So grab one of the little maps that we have out at the front desk and join us tomorrow. No towels are required. Um, it's forest bathing. It's bathing is really kind of a misnomer. It's more of an immersion in nature, and I think it's something that we as human beings sometimes forget that we are of the natural world. We're not of this world that we've created around us with buildings and cars and highways and things like that. We're of the natural world, and that's where we probably do our best. Um, it's also an engagement of mindfulness. And Dr. Lynn Rossi years ago had me participate in some work she did. And I did not realize how important that mindfulness, just being kind of in tune with your own body was until she and I talked about it and she pointed a few things out. So this mindfulness that we get from being out in nature is essential. If you'd also like to keep up with what we have going at Mizzou Botanic Garden, please visit our website at garden.missouri.edu, where you can sign up for our e-newsletter, the leaflet, and also find information about becoming a friend of the Mizzou Botanic Garden. Our first guest is Dr. Anand Chakalingam, who is a professor of medicine in cardiology. He's been with the university since 2006. His major emphasis are cardiomyopathy. I said that right? Okay. Mental stress and holistic interventions, including spending time in nature. He collaborates with Siddha doctors, exercise and nutrition experts, and psychologists to optimize lifestyle. He has pioneered a unique, heartfelt living cardiac wellness program, both in the United States and India, aimed at improving health through deeper self inquiry, and is the founder of www.highlifejourney.org, a nonprofit online initiative taking cardiovascular prevention to cardiac patients globally. He encourages spending time with nature as central to mindfulness and self-awareness. Please welcome Dr. Anand Chakalingam.
Good evening, friends. It's a pleasure to be part of this amazing event. For the last 20 years or so that I've been a cardiologist, I've been adding 4 or 5 medicines when someone gets diagnosed with a heart attack or heart failure. Already they are on 10, 15 medicines, so it just adds some more. But now that I collaborate with ancient Indian traditional medicine called Siddha, their concept is 20% medicine, herbal treatments and things like that, but 80% is consciousness, mindfulness, self-inquiry. So I'm not a Siddha doctor, but I'm a Western medicine doctor. But when I collaborate with them, I realize how much potential there is in nature to heal itself. So instead of adding 5 medicines, when I practice integrative cardiology, we are able to take a person off 23 medicines. He was on 24 to start with. So that is the real inherent healing potential that we all carry throughout life. I thought until the age of 60, but only a couple of months ago, one of my patients came and said, "No, doc, you're wrong. I'm 80.5 years old and I can heal myself because of these methods." So it's only humbling to see how potent nature is in helping us, and it's always ready. It's up to us to open ourselves to this. So when we talk about our intellect, that has separated us over the last, I would say, 20,000 years from our natural uh, being. So when we look at the mirror or the water and see our reflection, we are only seeing the outside. But to look within, to understand who we really are, meditation works, mindfulness, Lynn Rossi teaches, works. But a direct way of doing this is just by spending time with nature. Mindfulness is inherently built into being in nature. So this is what I'm so glad and proud to be a part of this amazing evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sonia Wilhelm Stanis, Professor and Associate Director in MU's School of Natural Resources, where she has been teaching and conducting research for the last 14 years. Her work is focused on the human dimensions of natural resource management with a particular focus on the role of parks and public lands in promoting physical activity and public health. Her research has examined a variety of topics ranging from access to parks, attributes that promote physical activity, public engagement in planning and design, considerations related to diversity and youth, as well as related work examining environmental justice and climate change with respect to outdoor recreation and natural resources. So Dr. Sonia is doing more for heart health than all the cardiologists here in town because this is prevention, and prevention is not expensive. It doesn't look fancy because people don't call 911, get on helicopters, come in, get advanced technological interventions. But actually, the only proof that we have for living longer, for biological aging reversal, is connecting with our inner nature and eating right, being relaxed, and nature does this for us. So I genuinely believe the work you are doing is so important, and in any way I can support it, I'd be so happy to. Thanks so much for this opportunity. Please come up on stage. Welcome, Dr. Sonia Wilhelm Stanis.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here for this evening. This is a topic that I'm passionate about in my own work, and it makes me so happy to see all of you here to learn about this and be part of this lecture and conversation today. I would like to take a moment to share, if this is an interest to you, to encourage you to get in contact with myself or others and learn more about some of the things that is happening on campus and in our community. So for example, we have a lot of faculty here at MU that are tackling some of the issues that you'll be hearing about today. And I've collaborated with graduate students, faculty in the School of Natural Resources and across campus and the School of Health Professions and a variety of different areas. And we're doing some work looking at trying to promote parks as a public health resource. We also in the School of Natural Resources have some classes, both at the graduate and undergraduate level, that relate to this area. So for example, I teach a Parks Health and Wellness class, and this is a class in which students get to engage and examine some of the research that we're going to be hearing a little bit more about tonight. And so it's an opportunity for them to start learning and thinking about ways that we can promote natural resources as a career and opportunities there. We also have some other collaborations on campus. We have an undergraduate certificate in what's called Natural Environment and Human Health. It's a collaboration within the School of Natural Resources and the Department of Public Health and the School of Health Professions. And so it's another opportunity that we've got some momentum on this topic here on campus. As another example, the School of Natural Resources has recently been putting plants in our classrooms in recognition of the role of nature, even in small doses, that can do for human health. Lastly, I just want to mention in our community beyond just campus is that we have so many amazing resources here, I guess both on campus and in the community, to take advantage of enjoying nature and experiencing some of the health benefits that you'll be hearing about tonight. This ranges from on campus with the work that the Mizzou Botanic Garden is doing to the amazing Columbia Public Parks and Recreation Department that really is a great resource here in town. Also some of the other nearby natural resources. We've got state parks, we've got Missouri Department of Conservation, all right at our doorstep. And I believe it's one of the things that makes our community such a wonderful place to live. So if tonight's topic does spark some additional interest in you for learning more about this, engaging in nature, I encourage you to reach out to me and others to learn more about these opportunities, whether you want to learn more about research, maybe you or someone you know want to take some courses, or you just want to know about some of these great resources on our doorstep. I would love to talk with you. So with that, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce tonight's featured guest, Dr. Jacquelyn Wolf, a research social scientist with the University of Washington's College of the Environment. Based on professional experiences early in her career as an urban forester in South Florida and a landscape architect in the Midwest, she became interested in the interactions between human and ecological systems and has spent her career investigating people's perceptions and behaviors with regard to urban landscapes. Based on the principles of environmental psychology, Dr. Wolf's studies have explored human dimensions of open space, urban forestry, and natural systems, including the distinct human health benefits of nearby nature. She has examined people's preferences and perceptions in regard to urban public landscapes and looked into the costs and benefits of urban forestry and integration of nature into urban transportation systems. She is also interested in the involvement of youth in nature activities, specifically in urban greening work. Dr. Wolf has championed the importance and benefits of nature to humans as a keynote speaker, both nationally and internationally, and we are pleased to have her as our guest this evening to share her expertise. So please welcome Dr. Jacquelyn Wolf.
Good evening, everyone. I think the microphone is working. We'll see if this picks up as good. Thank you so much. So the topic tonight is, there we go, the roots of good health. And thanks to the two people who spoke before me, that is such a great introduction, a great sort of segue into these ideas that I'll be sharing with you. And I'll be moving through these ideas fairly quickly. I'll be just providing sort of a sampler of the research, ideas, and different opportunities that are available for nature experiences and health. And the roots of all of this, right? When I speak with people who are not, say, involved with horticulture or urban forestry or landscape architecture, they often are focused only on that tree trunk at the ground and above and the canopy overhead and how to manage that. But we all know, I imagine most of you in this room fully recognize the importance of a solid, healthy, extensive root system. And that's what I'm sharing with you today. Nature as a root to human health. Nature as an undercurrent, a below ground influence that a lot of people are not aware of. But the research that I'll be sharing with you rather quickly today really supports this above ground to below ground, our bodies, ourselves, our communities, and our households, and how health is wrapped into that with nature experiences. So what I'll share with you very, very quickly here, the outline. Research review, an academic pursuit. I'll share the consequences or the results of that. then there are so many different dimensions of how we respond to nature in terms of health. I've decided to focus on mental health because I'm seeing that is very prominent in the messages or the inquiries that people have shared with me. Also post-COVID or during COVID, we've seen a lot of attention now to mental health from in people who are very young to adults and older. And how does all of that connect in our lives? I'll then offer some practical examples. All right, a review. This is a procedure or an exercise that academics often do across their careers. And that is, for those of you who may not be familiar with this, you decide, after a lot of projects have been done, studies have been done of rather narrow questions or more limited questions, someone or a group of people look across this and say, well, what are the patterns? What do we know? What is the current knowledge? And we did this. I collaborated with some organizations and people in Canada, as well as the United States, the Forest Service, and we published this just a short while ago. Typically, here's what we did. You scan thousands of articles using preset criteria, then you winnow those down. In this case, it went to hundreds. And finally, you apply. What we did was science quality evaluation. And we arrived at about 200 studies that focus on trees and the relationship to human health. And I want to mention that I have done reviews of other broader topics, broader landscape and nature experiences, and these articles number in the thousands. And I find that sometimes when I speak about this, people will casually respond, oh, you know, there must be 100, maybe 200 of these studies. They're happening all over the world. The pace of publication is accelerating, and we're into thousands of science studies. You may know, I'll say, at times I feel like as a social scientist, I am confirming the obvious because I imagine that many of you are gardeners or you work with extension. You have a connection to nature, and that may be why you're here. So what I'll share with you may not seem earth-shaking in terms of the findings, but you may find that there are examples, new ideas you haven't thought about. Or if you take these numbers and this information in certain situations, such as the medical field, you can help promote this idea and encourage more activation about nature and health. So what did we find? The article is no fun to read. I admit that, right? Journal publications. So I'll provide some of the highlights. First highlight was some of the studies tell us about nature and wellness. And that is, we may feel fine, but we may have moments we feel stressed. We may not feel up to speed or quite right every single day. Having nearby nature opportunities, experience opportunities, contributes to wellness, to promoting a general feeling and condition of wellness. Some people, though, are diagnosed. So again, your example of people who may have heart issues. Diagnosis, heart physiology, various issues, mental health, and so on. There are studies showing that prescribed time in nature, particularly on a routine basis, can be quite valuable in treating and responding to those illnesses or diseases. So general wellness, two general treatments or two general outcomes: general wellness, treatment, and therapy. Another kind of global or general finding is if you speak to healthcare providers or public health officials, this is a term that they're using a lot now: social determinants of health. And so if you're ever in a situation where you're talking to people about this and they have some influence over healthcare, over public health in your community, throw out social determinants of health. Shows you're in the know, right? What this is about then is a complete state of physical, mental, and social health. And so often, maybe you encounter this with your patients, but when people think about their health and their behavior, it focuses on the individual. Am I eating the right foods? Am I drinking bottled water or not? Am I exercising as much as I should? In many situations and circumstances, those individual choices are not as much influence on our health as is a broader set of environmental factors. Access to education, access to work, access to quality housing. And there at the very top, the natural environment, both the risk and toxins with the environment, but now the term salutogenic benefits or salutogenic influences on our health. So, social determinants of health suggest and reinforce the complexity of influences on our health and prevention, the possibility of nature being an element of prevention or health promotion in our lives. Another topic that rose up as we were looking at all these articles, the most recent research is addressing dosage. So having been doing some of this for a number of years, it was at one time adequate in the research to say, well, we've got this green thing. It's parks, access to parks or a landscape, or you're doing gardening. And then there's a particular health outcome we're interested in. What is the correlation? What is the relationship? But we didn't know that much about, well, how much influence is there? So dosage is now of prominence in this research. And you see there's some patterns starting to emerge. One is the amount of time per session, 20 to 30 minutes. Forest bathing typically is 60 to 90 minutes, but we find that even a much shorter amount of time, there's a reduction in stress, depression, blood pressure, and so on. And then if we look at the cumulative amount of time in nature over a week, studies are showing about 120 minutes a week or so. That really aligns with the CDC guidelines for physical activity. What are they for adults? Any of you know? 150 minutes a week is what a CDC is recommending. And they're also recommending that it not be a big blast of effort one day or one afternoon, but that it be multiple sessions across the week. So we're seeing some parallel here between the physical activity guidance, which is great for health promotion, as well as nature experiences for a variety of benefits. Another topic that has risen up in this research is diversity and equity. And because we now have big data analysis opportunities. So this machine, my laptop in my bag, the computing capacity is equivalent to a room of this size decades ago in being able to crunch numbers. So one can sit at your desk and access, say, remote sensing satellite information about green distribution or a local map, and then you can look at health data and do a comparison of the two. And what these studies show in many cities, not all, but many cities, there's a disparity in the distribution of parks, green, and trees. People of different cultural background and lower socioeconomic status do not often have as many trees and parks as more affluent communities. Not so long ago, that was understood but not seen as a big deal, right? Oh, park, isn't that nice? Trees, well, they're pretty, but now we know how essential nearby nature is, not only for human health, stormwater management, thermal comfort, a human health dimension, all sorts of things. So the attention to parks and gardens and access and distribution is of there's greater attention to that right now. If you'd like to learn more about that, there are a number of sources. If you search parks, disparity, gentrification is another term that comes into this. But this is one of the better sources I've found, the nature gap analysis. And what they have done is to, again, using big data analysis, look at trends by cultural groups, by economic status, and look at the distribution of green spaces within cities. And they've also done a breakout of this by state. So if you'd like to look in particular at Missouri, you can go to this website and find some of that information. Lots of different breakdowns. I'm just sharing a couple of slides. This one, for instance, is white people, people of color, and what they're calling nature deprived. Also income, looking at income in relationship. And of course, there's often correlation between cultural background and income. Not all the time, but what we see here is people of low income and non-white are less like or more likely to be in a nature deprived area. And again, not so long ago, this wasn't seen as an issue or a problem, but now we understand how important it is to have nature in our everyday environments. So cities are developing policy. Federal government is now developing policy for its distribution of natural resources budgets and addressing some of these disparities. Another thing that we're seeing as a consequence, we see it in the review of all these articles, and we see it also in the action that's following this publication, is expanded partnerships. So we're going beyond, well, the tree people talking to the garden people, talking to the parks people. We are seeing a more extended interest in this. So healthcare and public health, for instance, as shared by one of our speakers this evening. Schools are becoming ever more interested. School districts, teachers, principals attempting to integrate more nature within the classroom, within the campus, and within their teaching activities. Civic organizations coming to this, Rotary, Lions, those sorts of community-based organizations. I was talking with a group about this a couple of weeks ago, and someone told me, yeah, we're doing a tree planting in this neighborhood, and the VFW chapter, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, are one of our partners. Who would have thought? But this organization is dedicated to community, it's dedicated to civic service, and so they're starting to see trees and parks and gardens as part of their broader mission. All right, so we did this scoping review. I shared the highlights with you. What were the highlights? I'm going into teaching mode here. What were the highlights? Come on. So the partnership opportunities, expanded partnerships. What else? Yes. Yes, yes. So what this was, when I started when I started doing this and started at the University of Washington in the mid 90s, and people would ask, you know, Kathy, would you come and do a lecture in my class? I literally had maybe 20, 30 studies to speak from. So now, picking and choosing what to speak about for different audiences and different locations can be kind of a challenge for me. In fact, I was working on slides. Pete will attest to this. I was working on slides up until about a couple of hours ago, you know, from what I learned from today. What else did I share with you? Yes, so that is a historic legacy. There are a number of reasons for it. And so I'm seeing that people and organizations that are committed to addressing these disparities, they're attempting not only to insert or plant more trees in parks, but they're attempting to understand, why did this happen in the first place, and how do we address that? How do we not make the same mistakes? Anything else? Pardon me? Wellness. Wellness and or therapy and treatment. And they're a little different in how the studies are done and how people respond to these things. And don't forget social determinants of health. All right, now I'm going to move into a little more focus across this research. And this has been really brought to mind, literally, during COVID. I am receiving so many inquiries about the importance, or why is it important to have nature with regard to mental health. And that is carrying over into research I'm seeing from elementary school children to college students to adults to elders in care facilities. And for me, Nature was an incredible, continues to be an incredible antidote to the COVID experience. So I live on an island outside of Seattle, Bainbridge Island, so I have quick access to the water. My husband and some friends, we said, despite what some people said in the last presidential administration, the COVID thing is going to last for a while. So we started kayaking. And we've kayaked almost every weekend since COVID started. We maybe do 10, 12, 15 miles paddle. In July, we hit 1,000 miles. We started to tally it all up. We hit 1,000 miles. It's been remarkable. I mean, automatic social distancing, right? When you're in a 14-foot boat, you can't help but be, fairly far apart from everyone else. But as part of that, we have paddled along shorelines that do not have public access. There may be private properties or they're public properties that don't have roads to them yet. They haven't been developed yet. And some of the trees that we saw along these paddles, this is a Pacific madrone hanging out over the water. And at times I'll see these trees, these big gnarly trees, and I'll tell my paddle companions, if you want to go on, I'll catch up with you. I just need to look. This is my forest bathing from the water, on the water, not in the water, right? And I have found that the restorative ability of this, the mention of mindfulness, so that is a core element of forest bathing. But what I've detected is being in nature like this, and it doesn't have to be this far away or this much exertion, but not only mindfulness, but mind wandering. And in recent research in psychology, there's more attention to mind wandering and its benefit to us. Creativity, productivity, the generation, the sparking of new ideas. Because not so long ago, the psychology of mind wandering was, oh no, that's about distraction. A kid looking out the window in the classroom and not being productive. But we're now seeing that mind wandering, in addition to mindfulness, can be of benefit to us, intentionally as well as kind of deeper psychological response. Climate has also initiated, we're seeing mental health concerns. And there are these extreme events. Derecho, in December, I'll be interacting with some people in Iowa where they had severe derecho experiences a couple of years ago, lost thousands of trees in the cities of Iowa. Wildfire, where I live now, we're in the midst of wildfire. It should not be wildfire season any longer, but it is. It's extending more and more. Flooding, we're hearing about Jackson, Mississippi and the consequences of flooding. All of this, one term for this is solastalgia, a term that was coined decades ago, but is now becoming more relevant to our lives. And that is this emotional or existential distress as we read about, experience, see the consequences of climate and extreme events. And so there's a swirl of things that are influencing our mental health at this time. By the way, I noticed some of you are taking notes and taking pictures. I will share this slide stack after the event if anybody would like to access that. We can figure out how to share that at that time. So let me now do a bit of a deep dive on nature and mental health. Yet another takeaway from the review is we saw across the articles and the thousands of publications that there is value in having nature in our lives from the very earliest hours of our lives through the entire life cycle to the very end of our lives. So that's kind of this range or spectrum is what I'll be sharing with you with regard to mental health. Children, healthy microbiome. There's a lot of attention now to probiotics. And what we're learning is that children benefit from contact with nature at a very early time in their lives because as one ecologist describes them, these are old friends. We have evolved outdoors and they're microorganisms that become a part of us. They're ingested in some way and they become part of a system that supports immune function, that can help with mental health as we age. And so this is quite important. And eating dirt might not be the solution, but providing opportunities for children to be outdoors and having this contact with old friends is a value. When I first saw these images and put them together, I was reminded that little girl on the bottom left, one of my sisters ate rocks when she was a kid. I remember that. She would eat rocks. And we were all like, what are you doing? And my parents were, stop it, stop it. But she's a really healthy person. Maybe that had something to do with it. Some classic studies that were done by Ming Kuo some time ago looking at ADHD. And what they found was that children who are diagnosed with ADHD, spending time, playtime in different environments, in this case, there was a park, there was a kind of a green neighborhood space, and then a downtown, highly built place. And they found that just 20, there's that 20-minute again, the dosage, 20-minute guided walks. Children who were in the park environment they performed better on cognitive puzzles and attention sort of exercises. And this research, again, the translation of this to practical programs and situations, it's happening everywhere. And one of these is forest schools. These are preschools where the kids are outdoors as much time as possible, all through the year, despite the weather. And in various cities, these are happening. And so there's an attention, as with any preschool, to some of the academic preparation, learning colors, alphabet, that kind of thing. But also there's other developmental benefit opportunities. So creative play, working with other people, collaboration and cooperation in play. This is a really important time for children, and forest schools then are an opportunity for them to be outdoors and learning these skills. Including, I love up there on the bottom left, that one child, my turn on the microscope. You know, maybe we learn a little bit more about how to engage with our friends and colleagues. If you are interested in this sort of work or work with children, schools, Children in Nature Network is a wonderful resource. It's a website. There are these infographics that they have developed from research projects, but they also offer a lot of case studies of successful programs, how do you reach out to, say, a school administration to encourage outdoor classrooms and those sorts of things. So great resource. All right, we get a little older, high school, and some studies. This one was done by Randy Matsuoka across multiple high schools in the upper Midwestern United States. And across hundreds of students, perhaps even thousands, found these positive associations with nature on the campus and window views. Better test scores, higher graduation rates, fewer occurrences of criminal behavior. And there may be a connection there with some studies that have been done recently by the Forest Service showing that cleaning up vacant lots in cities is associated with reduced crime rates. So introducing nature and probably the dynamic of a neighborhood working together to clean these vacant lots may be associated with the crime reduction as well. We get older. I don't know about you, but you know, from that high school, college age to adulthood, the physical activity diminished a bit. So important. That dosage idea, 150 minutes a week as a routine part of one's lifestyle, really important. Cardiovascular, mental health, respiratory health. You can speak to a much longer list of benefits, I'm sure. Diabetes reduction, so on. So this is, if there's anything we can do to encourage people to be outdoors and physically active, it's quite valuable. And so physical activity of itself is valuable, but studies are showing that there's another layer of benefit associated with doing that activity outdoors. So here was another review, and people claimed greater feelings of revitalization, energy, decreased tension, depression, but this is helpful. Motivation to be physically active. Not many people in the US are achieving that 150 minutes a week. So this study found there was greater satisfaction. Maybe that's the motivation to continue to be active, to go out and pursue those activities. So there's a lot of different dimensions to this. But you have to get out of the car, right? That's so important. Walking the dog dog walking is associated with adults being more active outdoors, but not in this way. How does this all happen? So these causal pathways, if you have nature of some kind, a health outcome, statistically you see a relationship, why? The why questions are now very much a part of all of this research. And here's one idea. Greg Bratman is a colleague of mine at the University of Washington. And what he has studied is the 90-minute walk and the decrease in depression, stress, and so on, and also some neuroscience results. But what he is proposing is this idea of rumination is out there in psychology. It's the idea that if we are in a negative thought mode, we sort of reinforce ourselves. We go into an ever deeper cycle of negative thought. What he finds is when people are outdoors and spending time outdoors, they lift themselves out of those negative thoughts. So the rumination decreases. And that may have consequence for depression. It may have consequence for other mental health concerns. Another study found that, and this was a great study because there's a group of people who were in that therapy mode. They were diagnosed for depression. Some of them walked on a green route. Some of them walked, they were randomly assigned. They walked on the red route. Red route is less landscaped. And 50-minute walks, and they found that then people, cognitive and affect or mood benefits, and the effect sizes for people who, those who are not healthy compared to some who were healthy, much greater effect sizes. So that baseline is important, where you start from. But Mark Berman is doing some great work. He's at the University of Chicago, and he continues to study cognitive response, human mental health response to nature. Forest therapy and forest bathing. So there was a pitch at the beginning of this for any of you who would like to participate in a forest bathing session. And what is it? And what's it about? It is not going out to a spa or a bathtub or in the woods or a hot tub in the woods. This is about mindful, attentive, sensory immersion within a forest environment. And this doesn't have to be, it's great. There are parks and spaces beyond the city where this can happen, but it can happen within the city. It can happen within a fairly small space. I've participated in guided forest therapy sessions at various events, and one that I did, there were two guides, one from Singapore, one from Hong Kong, and they said, we're doing a deeply urban forest therapy session. If anybody wants to join us, I thought, wow, how are they going to do this? And we did a forest therapy session with one tree. Hour and a half, one tree. And I was astounded because they took us into, it's kind of, instead of a negative rumination, forest therapy is a positive rumination. You begin to release the tension. It's surprising how much tension we carry in our bodies from all the busyness and attention demands on our lives. And these sessions, you tend to release that and you feel it leave. And not only that, but that feeling can continue beyond the session. I find it lasts with me for maybe 24 hours or so. So, you know, maybe some of us need a psychotherapist or a psychologist or a counselor. I need a forest bathing counselor, you know, on a weekly basis. Haven't found that person yet, but there is that benefit, possibly. What do we know about this activity? The array of health benefits, really well studied. This work started in Japan, South Korea. It's now going on around the world. Cholesterol improvements, blood glucose, better management of blood glucose, depression, chronic pain, or at least self-expressed chronic pain, heart rate variability. The last one there, immune function. Some studies are suggesting that an element of our immune system, these natural killer cells, may be activated, better activated by forest bathing sessions. Why? We're really not sure, but it might have to do with the volatile compounds that trees emit. When you walk in a forest, you smell different things, right? You have different sensations. Part of that are phytoncides. They're volatile compounds that are in the air that maybe we're taking in, and that might have this influence on the natural killer cells. And not so long ago, I would talk about forest bathing, and people would, oh, what is it? It's kind of woo-woo, isn't it? But now there are people who are certified guides. They go through an extensive training, partly remote, partly their practicum is field-based, hands-on, if you will, forest-on, if you will. And what these people bring then, some of them are attempting to develop this profession as a nonprofit, working with recreation departments, some of them attempting to work with hospitals and other healthcare facilities. So it's really fascinating how quickly this has emerged and has taken off. Mental wellness and function. I'm going to go on a little different track here. We're coming out of this time of hyper attention to screens, to tasks, but that's now a part of our life in a way that hasn't been typical of human existence. And with this, we can develop fatigue. I don't know if you feel it, for me, a couple of hours on Zoom, and I'm like, I'm out of here. I have to check out. I have to go out in my garden for a short while or take a walk down the block and back. And there is some people that I studied with, Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, examined this fatigue, this cognitive fatigue that happens to us. And they developed and promoted this idea of attention restoration and ART. And what it is about how do we recover that cognitive fatigue? It's a reality of our lives. All the distractions that come at us, text, mail, what's on the screen, projects that we have to work on, budgets that we have to finish. And if we become fatigued, we can become frustrated. We can become more impulsive. We may not make as good choices in our lives. We can also become more aggressive towards people that are near us. I don't know. I've certainly experienced these things. I don't know if you have. But next time you've been focused on a task or on the screen for hours, think about how you feel and how that might have influenced your relationship with others around you, work colleagues or people at home. And I think you'll find this effect carries through. The Kaplans also explored what are the design elements of outdoor space that may alleviate AR or alleviate attention fatigue. One is a sense of being away. We don't have to be far away, but far away from the source of this condition. And it may be just outside the door of where we are. It may be down the street a little bit. It may be a nearby park. And then extent compatibility is are we comfortable within this space? Is there seating if we need it? Are the walking surfaces safe? Do we feel secure within this space? But then another and really key component is soft fascination. What is it about the natural environment that draws our attention without effort, without having to try to focus on something? What are the bits of nature that are fascinating to you? Birds, wildlife, people. I don't know about you, but if I'm at my desk with a big window and there's a squirrel, I'm on it, right? Or a bird feeder. What else? Yeah. Sounds. Yeah. Wind through the trees, again, birds or other natural sounds. What else? Yes. Yeah. Smells, fragrances. What else? Sunrises. So daily change of nature, seasonal change of nature, annual changes of nature. Again, there's so many possibilities here that can be incorporated into outdoor spaces. Water, 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 water. People, their attention is drawn to water. Me, pollinators. Pete, who just stepped out, took me on a little bit of a tour of the campus here, and there's some beautiful gardens, and the pollinators were all over it. Bees, flies, butterflies, that's where my attention was. And biodiversity. We're seeing now that ecologists are collaborating with the psychologists and public health investigators. They're finding that another increment of benefit is derived from having more biodiverse environments. In this particular study, they looked at bird abundance, vegetation diversity, and found an additional increment of value, mental health value. And I'm noticing here the time. Maybe I've elaborated on some of these slides a little more than I planned. We're kind of cutting into Q&A. How's the time with all of you? If I continue a little over 6:30 or 7:30, uh-oh, I was on Pacific time zone there for a moment. If I continue for a little while, is that okay? All right, great. All right, another takeaway, and this is kind of Kathy's brain working and trying to resolve all this information into some very portable messages, because that's what I'm often called on to do is speak to local electeds or speak to people who are making decisions about cities and urban planning. And I don't have 45 minutes or an hour to speak. I have to bring very portable messages, and maybe some of those are resonating with you as well. Here's one, nutrition as a metaphor. We need high quality nutrients, vitamins, minerals, energy every single day. High quality. Sometimes we lapse and get a bag of chips, right? But generally, we know healthy food is good. But we also enjoy those occasional special meals in a restaurant, particularly now COVID's done. We go out, they're memorable. And once in a while, there's a feast, be it Thanksgiving, a special event. And those have special meaning to us for a variety of reasons. I put to you that nature experience is equivalent. We have, and I'll share here, my daughter is a wilderness guide in Alaska. Wow, the bennies of adult children, right? She has taken us on some incredible adventures. Ice caves under glaciers, bear watching in Alaska, paddling, kayak camping at the base of Glacier Bay, and at night hearing pieces of those glaciers breaking off like there's a thunderstorm happening all night. Amazing. And rock climbing. 60 years old, she started me rock climbing. How could that be? But I love it. Those events for me are the memorable feast, but they don't take away from my everyday garden, my everyday walk through my streetscape on my block, my occasional walk to a nearby park. And that's, I think, an important takeaway in all of this, is we need the full span of nature experiences in our lives for health and wellness. All right, this is where now it gets real. I took some of the research and thinking about some ideas of how this might be applied on this campus. And Pete, again, in the tour that he shared with me today, I saw expression of some of this already. So here's some ideas to reinforce that. Promote walking. Anything you can do with your organization or any place that you work to promote walking is really important. And that might include, by invitation, programs specifically for children or for elders or for families. Or maybe you set up walking meetings. I occasionally have walking meetings with students, and it's a very different dynamic when you're out and walking along and sharing ideas compared to being in a conference room where people are doing the email prayer or text prayer, right? They're looking down and, oh, I'm not checking anything. So think about different opportunities to get people outdoors as a part of their work or routine activity. There are incredible benefits from group walks. If we are a very social species, and if we're isolated, we're lonely, we're more prone to disease. Research is showing that, and we're less we don't recover from illness and interventions such as surgery as quickly if we're isolated and lonely. So group walks are a possibility to encourage more physical activity and to help build up some informal social relationships, some loose friendships, people that you might call on if you need help or in a time of need or a time of celebration for that matter. Walk with a Doc is a national nonprofit that encourages and offers ideas about how to start healthcare providers walking with groups of patients. And again, it's a very different dynamic from being in the examination room or in the clinic. And so this is an idea. I understand that Mizzou has one of the best research medical and treatment centers in the nation. So maybe this is something that could be incorporated perhaps into the doctor training, perhaps into the healthcare services themselves. And related to that is Parks prescriptions. There are now networks of doctors who are literally, after examining patients and diagnosis, they are recommending routine parks or outdoor activity as part of their treatment. And there's a network of people doing this in Washington, D.C. Recently, a network emerged across the entire country of Canada. Of course, they have a national healthcare system, so it's a little easier to establish a network like that. But it's literally similar to a medical prescription in that, again, there are nonprofits that offer ideas about how to set this up, these prescription sheets that you literally just print off and away you go. But by designating the location, the type of activity, the frequency, the duration, and then checking up on patients routinely as they come in for follow-up exams. How's it going? You know, are you finding a place to do this? If not, let me help you. Maybe we can connect with the Parks Department and maybe there's a place near where you live where this is possible. And what is happening around Parks prescription is some communities are actually doing inventories of their parks to determine the feasibility for this. So these partnerships, a unique partnership is developing between a parks department, outdoor rec department, and so on, and the medical community. And I was consulting for a while with CONAFOR, which is the National Forest Service of Mexico. And they were starting out doing this inventory on a national basis. New director of the department, that was sidelined. Maybe it'll come back. I understand that Italy is now, as a nation, beginning with this interest in forest bathing to do that kind of inventory. So there's an idea, maybe something that can happen in Columbia or even across this campus. Also, thinking about tree planting. Here on this campus, being a botanic garden and looking at some of the displays and the plantings, but starting to think about how there might be another level of design that specifically promotes health. And I collaborated with some landscape architects on this article a short while ago called Greening Blocks. And we set out 8 different ideas for how to look at or promote a combination of climate response and human health response in urban forestry. So how do we set up trees so people can see through windows? And looking at maybe around residence halls, for instance, or apartment buildings. How do you set up tree plantings so there's more views? Creating refuge, particularly thermal refuge. Now that we're experiencing high heat events, how do you set up pockets of trees, small groves of trees, so that people have comfortable places to move through a city or move through a community while seeking or experiencing shade? So those are the types of things that are now this fine grain, very fine scale of how do we carry nature and health into how we design and create our living environments. And the last example of that, this scholar, Cecil Canninendijk, he works internationally but has a very practical sense of how nature is taken into urban planning. And he is now promoting this 3-30-300 idea. And that is every person, every household should have a view of 3 trees. Every community should have 30% canopy cover. Every person, every household should have access to a park within 300 meters or 300 yards. These are really ambitious. This sets up very, very green cities. But what he has found is urban planners are often asking, give us some benchmarks, give us some metrics that we can work with. And so this is starting to be taken up by cities all around the world as a possible set of goals as they pursue urban forestry for the sake of health, climate, and other benefits. So I've gone a little over the allotted time, and I'm willing to hang out as long as you are in terms of questions, comments, suggestions. But what I've shared with you is this review that we did, which really set up a set of messages, a set of notions, a set of ideas that we can share with our communities about well-being and therapy, about social determinants of health, about life course benefits. And that includes mental health benefits, a wide range of mental health benefits. And we can then, with all of this, my hope and my aspiration is we can set up more roots in our communities for health, human health and wellness associated with quality tree plantings and maintenance and management of trees for that below ground environment as well. So again, I appreciate this invitation. Wonderful to be here. I've had a very busy day with students, with faculty, and now this evening with all of you. So thank you. And any thoughts, suggestions, questions you might have, let's go.
I just had a real simple question. Is there a qualitative difference, if you're in an urban setting and they just have street trees, is there a qualitative difference between that and, say, being out in a forest? Are you better to go to the forest than you are to just walk through your neighborhood with street trees?
So the question is, in terms of experience of trees, say a streetscape with planted, intermittently planted trees versus going out in a more wild, if you will, forest area. I would say that the research doesn't pull apart those distinctions really clearly, but whatever you have is better than nothing. That's what we see across the research, is that, so for instance, these disparities in the distribution of parks and trees. If we shoot too high and make unrealistic goals, it doesn't help anyone. So start with what you can, and that includes the experience on a daily basis. This metaphor I have of nature experiencing nutrition. Those fantastic once in a lifetime events. I mean, here's another one. All of August, I was in Peru on a combined research project and vacation trip. And my husband, myself, and a friend, we did a 7-day trek back door across the Andes into Machu Picchu. It was astounding. Very strenuous, but the nature encounters, they're imprinted in my mind and probably will be for the rest of my life. I don't need that to gain benefit from nature experience. I can go into a small garden, into many of the places here on campus that you have created and nurtured over the years, and they provide perhaps different degree of benefit, but they still provide benefit than a more remote kind of experience or extended experience.
Thanks so much for the amazing presentation. And also, you made it so specific for our Columbia community. Now, I realize why in my own neighborhood, why I choose to go on certain streets because they have so many more trees than certain other streets, and we have a puppy, 2-year-old, who makes me go out for walks.
A lot of dog walking, yeah.
I have a lot of rural patients who come to Colombia to take their heart health. And what about being in farmlands? Is that equivalent to being in nature, or is that lesser?
Really good question in that the research, this came up with the students as well earlier today. Most of the research that's been done in this realm has been done in north temperate forests. So through North America, Japan, China, Northern Europe. And now there's more exploration of different types of environments. I haven't seen as much about farmland and rural. It might be out there. It may be that I'm just not aware of it because I focused on more urban settings. But because of this interest in the relationship of these encounters with health, there seems to be exploration, more exploration of winter landscapes, desert landscapes, maybe agricultural or rural landscapes, though I'm not aware of it. So we're understanding more and more of the dimension of these activities, as well as different potential benefits for people of different ages and different socioeconomic settings or situations. You know, that, I have to say, so some of the things I've talked about here, audiences decades ago thought they were silly or ridiculous, sort of like your question, maybe. Some people. No, no. Yeah. Oh, totally. And then have you looked at Suzanne Simard's work? Yeah. So her recent book, she has added more understanding to all of that and the interrelationships by way of fungus and whatnot, the different organisms and their relationships. To your question, I don't know. As a scientist, I don't know. How can we deny it? We're all living organisms. The microbiome idea of internal development, healthy microbiome, and dependence on nature contact. Why would that not be also extended to our external, our skin, and our contact with those systems? I don't know, but I suspect we'll be learning more about that. Yeah. Yes. Uh, I would say I'm diagnosing some solastalgia here. uh, that's a much bigger topic than we have time for and that than I can really address. I will say during my flight time to arrive here, I've been reading a book called Saving Us. And it offers, I don't remember the author's name, maybe somebody can search that and toss it out to us. But what the author is, and she's a prominent international climate scientist writing this exactly about this. And what she suggests is meeting people where it matters to them, to encourage them to do things, to acknowledge climate change and to do things with regard to it. And that may not seem big enough, but her position is that if enough of us do that, we bring others along, we build momentum. And I'm reminded, excuse me, when my daughter was in university and she was in the environmental studies program at a university in Hawaii, and I would get what I termed the existential phone calls. And what was happening was she would go to one class at 8 and a prof would just dump all of this about ocean failure. Then she'd go to the next class and someone would dump all this stuff about forest ecosystem failure and so on and so forth. And she's 19, 20 years old. And Mom, what do I do? And I told her, just find what's important to you, find a bit of it, work toward that. And that's what she's really done in her early career. So that's may not be a very satisfying answer, but that's what, this is my little bit, my little contribution is I'm working with a colleague who is retired, but she was a prominent marine ecologist in NOAA. And we're working on a paper on reciprocity. So we're recounting this nature and health research and offering ideas for people to give back. If we receive so much for nature, how and why should we give back? And again, it's a small bit in all of this, but anybody else have any responses to that? Probably better responses than mine. Yes, please.
Through OSHER, MU Extension, I do a course on heartful living or the Siddha consciousness. And one of the most recent 4-week sessions we covered solastalgia. Is that what you call it? It's how we can empower uh, nature becoming more protected. Because 100 years ago, we did not know that we were hurting nature, but now we have so much science telling us where things are. From each of our own individual situations. For instance, I take care of a 70-year-old heart patient. I want him to eat healthy. He comes back after 4 months and tells me, Doc, my granddaughter made me eat healthy because she is turning plant-based. My granddaughter is only in high school. So then I did more and more research over the last 5 years, and it's so clear that if we eat more plant-based, we are protecting the environment by 90%. For instance, it takes 18, for a football field is needed for a standard American diet for one person for a whole year to sustain, whereas 18 people can sustain in a very nutritious, high micronutrient environment if they move plant-based. So that's why there is so much enabling power that we individually carry, and then turning down the temperature. So many things we can be mindful about. And I feel there is a lot that we can do to inspire the people around us. The simplest thing I've done is I don't have a treadmill at home. So I feel every time I have a chance, I need to be outdoors. So like that, we can find so many hundreds of things we can do. I'm just suggesting a couple here. Thanks so much. This is a real huge challenge. It cannot be minimized. The $1 burger in our fast food restaurants, they are not healthy, but they are the ones that they can easily access. And 9 out of 10 things sold in our grocery stores are not healthy. It's hard to get the message through, but people are realizing. In the Midwest, it's a little slower than in the East or the West Coast, but it's slowly coming through. And hopefully, today I learned so much about why the poor, economically deprived people have less access to green space, so that all these things are interrelated, and correcting these things is going to take a longer time. But at least now you've given us that consciousness, that awareness that this is the issue. Then society can move towards finding solutions. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. I think you're really aligning with your words in that we're all in a situation of adaptation. I find so in climate science, very generally they talk about mitigation, which is the reduction of greenhouse gases, carbon sequestration, and so on, and then adaptation. What are the consequences of climate change and how do we adapt to that? And your description of your garden and planting design, and I'm with you. I don't take my credit card to the plant nurseries anymore because it's dangerous. But I'm finding that I'm doing more infill. But that is another form of adaptation similar to what you described, is a choice of the food we eat, um, a choice maybe of how much we drive or not, consolidate trips. There's so many things. And this is all a personal adaptation in addition to some of the system adaptation I think is happening in some cities and some nations. Yes, yes. Uh, no question, and the importance of rainforests, not only on that local scale of a project I was working on in Iquitos, Peru, but internationally, obviously. I will say um, I try to be very careful about how much I extend my opinion. And as a scientist, I really don't know a lot about tropical forest systems and restoration or the degree of loss other than the most general sort of news that I read, maybe along with the rest of us. So the project that we were working on is attempt to understand community health associated with people who have moved from jungle and forest environments, first generation or multiple generation, and what sort of service delivery to these communities might improve environmental health and health quality for them. So I'm really not able to speak to the condition of the forests themselves or what sort of restoration work might be happening either in Peru, Brazil, or any other nation. Again, I suspect there are people within the forest and other study units here at this university who are quite well versed in that. And maybe you would have some names to suggest, or yeah. Sonia's the person to speak to. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Most definitely. So again, my very intentionally, I focused on urban areas, but in interacting with colleagues and reading a little bit about more rural and this project that we worked on in Peru, two thoughts come to mind. One is a lot of rural work has become mechanized. So people are sitting on machines, in machines, and they're watching screens. The GPS is guiding where the tractor is going and that sort of thing. So they may not be as active in their lifestyles now as they once were. That's one dimension of this. So concerns about obesity, concerns about this absence of physical activity are playing out in rural areas as well as more urban areas. And then with regard to that restorative capacity or interest in nature, part of the data collection that we did across these informal settlements on the Amazon River is we did cognitive mapping. And what one does is you ask someone to draw, you have a prompt, a question, or a statement, and you ask them to draw something, not literally a map, but the impression of a place or a system or what's in their life. And while these people that we've been studying, they're dependent on the river for fishing for their own households, and then they sell at market. When the river is down and they can grow crops, same thing, for their own use, for market. But the cognitive mapping, we saw so much about contemplative, restorative aspects of nature in addition to that subsistence and productivity. So I would say that they're probably in many people's minds, depending on your dependence on nature directly for your life and essential needs, there's still that balance of that activity and a restorative sort of connection or relationship with nature. That's a limited experience I've had, limited reading I've done. But I'm detecting that in, again, the study that we've been doing and some of the other research that I've encountered from other people. Yes. All right, connections across the audience. You know, all of this is evolving so quickly. The research, the translation to programs within communities, and I've also done some research on stewardship motivations, the people who voluntarily commit to tree plantings, and not just a one-off event, but sustained effort across the years. And their motivations include learning. You know, they want to constantly learn about things, but legacy, what do I leave behind with my modest efforts? Social interaction, they just enjoy the people that tend to come to these things. So we might think about like Park's prescription is typically, here's your prescription, go sit in nature. Maybe if there was a stewardship component to that as well, go find a tree relief program and be a part of a tree planting, tree maintenance, invasives removal, whatever it might be program. And there might be another dimension of healing or satisfaction with that, a more direct activity in addition to simply being in a nature setting. Hadn't really thought about that before. I might start pitching that to some people who are in the healthcare world and see what they think. I think we've reached the end of the evening.